Thank you for joining me for another quick hits conversation. Today I have a difficult one. Can you have good judgment without being judgmental? Kristin, kick us off.
And my answer to that is absolutely yes. And then from there, it's how do individuals actually define those words or those processes? Whether I think that they're using good judgment or being judgmental might sit differently than what you think is good judgment or judgmental.
So what's the difference between being judgmental
I think it's
and having good
our
judgment?
responsibility. We teach our children, it's our responsibility to be discerning, to look at the evidence that's around us and the feelings and the temperature in the room and make judgments according to that, so that you're safe, so that you're capable, so that you're able. And then you can cross that line and start deciding that it's about people and the other and the harshness of they're not like us, so I'm judging them differently. It becomes more personal. But then you cross the next line and your job is to judge if somebody is breaking a rule, a legal rule or a social dynamic rule. So you can, but it's difficult to do one without the other sometimes. Mm-hmm. How was that first circle? I'm done.
No, that was good. I had to think about this one a little bit too, and it's distinguishing being judgmental versus having judgment. And I think one applies to a person when you're evaluating a person, and that's judgmental, and the other one's evaluating a situation or a circumstance, which is judgment. Okay. And if you separate those two, I think that's a useful distinction.
And I think I'd add to that judging yourself as well. I think we all judge ourselves quite.
Oh, of course.
Obviously.
All the time. Yeah.
Yeah. I think, and Kristin mentioned this word, I think good judgment without being judgmental is discernment. I think a conversation around the difference between judgment and discernment is probably the way to answer the question. So, for example, I think if for me to differentiate between the two, being judgmental, it involves ego and power over, and coming from a place of insecurity or fear or jealousy or ignorance. I think it's kind of like you're passing a sentence on someone so the other person feels bad, and being closed-minded, and it's more about right or wrong. Whereas I think
sympathy, yeah.
Whereas I think being discerning doesn't have the ego. It comes from a place of empathy and understanding and insight and sort of more inner wisdom and not better or worse than, and probably more of a distinguishment between appropriate and inappropriate rather than right and wrong. So yeah, that's probably for me.
But then what about then discernment is positive and judgment is negative? But there are times where using your good judgment means judging something very negatively.
Yes.
So
you're judging something, but not someone negatively.
I might be judging someone very negatively based on their behavior and the facts and the evidence at hand. I might be judging.
We reserve that for special occasions, though. We do.
But that's the difference between that's being what's appropriate and inappropriate, rather than necessarily what's right or wrong. So you're judging someone's behavior as being inappropriate, right?
Is there an emotional component? Is discernment about facts and judgment is about an emotional response?
I think judgment is often an immediate reaction to something, isn't it? It's that unconscious, visual, straight reaction you have, whereas discernment might be a little bit more thoughtful.
This came up kind of because I made a comment about something. I made discernment. I made a hardcore. This is the fact, and someone said to me, "Judgy much?" And I'm like, "I'm not being judgmental. I'm just stating a fact." And so that's why I was like, "Well, how do you judge something without being judgmental?"
But if somebody is lying, they are a liar. So to call them a liar is judging them a liar. It's not, I've discerned that what they have done is lie, but I have no negative feelings.
That becomes a fact.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. So judging can be positive. You see something happen and you can good judgment exists. It's not just bad judgment. There is a place for judging people and using judgment. And then there's a place for using discernment. And they're not, I'm doing this so well.
I think it's around who you're being in that process, isn't it? It's
exactly about that.
Yeah. And if you're judging, but coming from a place of understanding and seeing the bigger picture and having insight and wisdom, you can still judge something to be bad or negative, but the way you're doing it is from curiosity and understanding, and I think that's the difference.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Do you agree?
I agree, and it brings me back to, it absolutely depends on who you are at the moment, if you're judging somebody or if you're just using good judgment.
I would also say who you are and how much baggage you are bringing in with you.
Absolutely.
Because a lot of time judgment comes with what you think you're trying to uphold in terms of your family values, your political values, your religious values. A lot of that's coming from outside of you that you feel like you need to uphold in that process of making judgment on someone.
Yeah, that's a really valid point. I think being judgmental is coming from a place of external views, so those cultures, right, beliefs and values and so on. There's certain standards and opinions and social pressures to uphold. Whereas being discerning is coming from a place of not worrying about any of that. It's coming from it's an inner thing rather than an external thing.
So does judgment have something to do with being putting yourself better than the one downness? Is that judgment, and expecting like someone should be better? Is that judgment versus judging?
That's judgmental.
That's judgmental.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to the words and how they define differently.
Mm-hmm.
Using good judgment, I can't see that, or using good judgment when you're making an assessment of a situation, I don't see where that's ever bad. Being judgmental, on the other hand, can be very harmful, and you're probably not employing all the things that you need to when you use good judgment, like empathy, like full knowledge. You're probably not bringing all those things in. Now you're just making a very quick, very narrow decision, and that could be judgmental.
Yeah, and back to your point about comparison there, that comparing yourself better or worse, that's being judgmental. And it doesn't, you can be comparing that you're better than or worse than. It can go either way as well.
Right.
So maybe that's the component. Maybe the component is if you're bringing yourself into the picture and creating a competition or a judgment between, as opposed to just, this is the situation. Is that maybe what we're talking about?
Oh, we've done that too. Yes.
Yeah, it's around stepping back, isn't it? It's having perspective. And taking ego and taking self out of the equation.
And is it possible that you could just be kind of having good judgment and looking at something, but someone can perceive you as being judgmental?
Ooh.
I think it's impossible for me to ever control how other people are going to perceive what I do.
Yeah. So in my situation where someone said to me, "Oh, judgy much," and I was really immediately like, that's not what I'm trying to do here. And I did, and then I felt judged.
Yeah. Passing sentence.
Right. Yeah. So it was interesting how I felt the need to defend myself against being judgmental when I was trying to be discerning or point out a fact or something.
Yeah.
When I have been accused of being judgmental, sometimes my response is, I retain the right to use good judgment. You can call that whatever you want. But I am defending myself. Obviously, I felt wounded, but I did say that to people.
Right. Yeah. So it sounds like we're saying the difference between being judgy and having good judgment is that emotional competition engagement in it, rather than just the stepping back and having the discernment. So that is our 10 minutes. I want to say thank you so much for having this conversation. I knew it was going to be interesting. I look forward to having another one with all of you very soon.